Audio is a medium that allows telling stories in an impactful, intimate way. Today, you meet the creators behind 4 of Hong Kong's most popular podcasts in a unique panel about podcasting as an alternative approach to storytelling. How do these podcasters approach their subjects? How do they tackle sensitive topics like mental health, resilience, and belonging as they are setting out to make a positive impact on their audience in Hong Kong and beyond? What are the hurdles and setbacks? What are the unexpected rewards? Moderated by me, #Impact podcast host Regina Larco, with panelists Cissy Radford from In the Changing Room, Emery Fung from Awkward Turtle at Work, and Juhi Gangaramani of Kelly Support Group's podcast, This Hong Kong Life. A special thanks to Catherine Platt and her brilliant team at the Hong Kong International Literary Festival for inviting us. Thanks to Asia Society Hong Kong Centre for hosting us, and to Rachel Smith of Hong Kong Stories podcast for all the support on the day off, and all the people in the audience that were brilliant. As always, you find all the links and show notes over at #impact.com/listen. This live podcast was recorded at Hong Kong International Literary Festival in November 2021. Enjoy.
Well, we are so thrilled, and I speak for all of us here, I think, that you allow us to speak about something we're so passionate about for the next hour, and we love to hear your voices as well. So whatever questions are in your head coming up as you listen to our conversations, we really want to hear your voices too. So please don't be shy. But first of all, let me introduce our rock star panel. These podcasters are putting their voices out there, making a massive impact with their shows. To my left here, Cissy Radford. Cissy is the program manager at Women in Sports Empowered Hong Kong, where she works to empower women and girls to lead active and meaningful lives. I know you've been really busy at your school tours this week, inspiring really young children to believe in themselves as well, yeah? And she's also the founder, why she's sitting on this podcasting panel, of the very popular In the Changing Room podcast that champions women in sport and discusses topics and issues at play in the world of sports. A round of applause for our wonderful Cissy! Hands up, any regular listeners of In the Changing Room in the house? Yeah! Very good. And for all of you that are not listening yet, you're going to start listening today. Emery Fung is in the house as well. Emery spent his early life in the UK and returned to kickstart his career in Hong Kong. And his beautiful podcast, Awkward Turtle at Work, has a lot to do with career transitions, transformations, reinventions to do as well. He aims to use these stories to celebrate differences and diversity at the workplace. And it was a huge honor that I was invited on the show recently. So thank you so much. And check out Awkward Turtle at Work. Emery, round of applause for you here. And we have Juhi Gangaramani. She is a college student studying psychology that has been hosting the This Hong Kong Life podcast by Kelly Support Group since the beginning of the year. She is passionate about mental health and specifically within youth, and she strives to foster a sense of community and support to reduce stigma. Juhi, I'm such a huge fan of your show. It's such an honor to have you here on stage with us today. Applause for Juhi! So, all of you here in the audience today are, for sure, either passionate readers, passionate podcast listeners, aspiring podcasters. Anyone here in the audience who is not familiar with podcasting at all? Like, who has listened to a podcast within the last, week? Yeah, a lot of podcast listeners here. Do we have fellow podcasters in the room that are looking to launch a podcast or about to launch a podcast? Yeah, we have a few. Yay! And maybe by the end of today, there might be a few more that want to launch a podcast, because we will share about what we get out of podcasting. And that actually brings me to Cissy, because what you shared with me beforehand was that you said, since you started your podcast, that your approach to storytelling has changed. Can you let us know in what way?
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you so much, Regina, and thank you everybody that's here. I'm super excited. Yeah, my podcast is only 18 months old, but in that time, it has really changed in terms of the format of it. And I think that's because I went into podcasting with quite a strict rubric of what I wanted other people to give me. And I think I had quite a clear idea of what I wanted people to hear, and what I wanted the outcome of the podcast to be. And I guess over time, I've just kind of let go of that more. And rather than beforehand giving people quite almost like a script of, we're going to talk about this, then we're going to talk about this, and then you're going to tell me this. And that's going to be our episode. Now I'm just like, let's just turn up and let's just see. And the last episode I recorded, we barely even talked about sport. So it's really evolved and it's changed. And I guess I've just taken, I guess, the control off of my episodes a bit, and I've kind of just put the power to the guest, which is what I should have done from day one, but I didn't. And so I guess I'm just a little bit less of a control freak now. But I'm not at all.
I think one thing that came up in our pre-talk was that when we started our podcast, we all wanted it to be perfect.
Right, exactly, yeah.
So I think as you go along in that creation process, you let go of that quite fast. But what is also, you mentioned now around 1.5 years ago, you started the podcast. So that was around when the pandemic hit.
Yeah, it was peak pandemic. Yeah.
Peak pandemic. And what we maybe have to point out is that all of us are doing interview podcasts. So we are speaking to other people, sharing their stories. Of course, there are many other formats of podcasting that you can explore. All of you that haven't explored all that is out there in podcasting, with audio dramas, of course, news broadcasts. There's just so much out there. We are focusing on interviews and conversations, and so does Emery. And your kind of like starting point for your interview show was also during the pandemic, when maybe there was a bit more breathing space for you to even get started. How was that for you starting out?
Yeah, definitely. I think COVID pushed a lot of people to, I guess, really pursue what they want to do. When normally we don't have the time to, you spend time commuting, and we save a lot of time from that. So it was really good. It was like a good outlet as well, I think, during COVID, for us to pursue what we want to do. And then that actually led me to a lot of things that I do now as well from the podcast, which I'm sure we'll get into in a bit as well.
How was your first recording? Like the very first recording? Who was that?
The first recording, let me think. The very first recording was actually a friend that I did first. I thought I'll start off with the easier one. Even any mistake, I can always go back to it. But I mean, for me, because my day job is in recruitment, so I'm very used to interviewing people. I'm very used to doing one-on-one conversations. That was, I guess, the entire podcast. That was the easier part that I can do. But in terms of the editing, the technicality, that was definitely very hard to understand as well.
Juhi, your podcast is very special. Can I get a little bit personal here now? Because I had your executive director of Kelly Support Group, that is Sky Sue, on #Impact Podcast a few years ago. And while we were doing the podcast and after we finished the recording, Sky is such a talented storyteller as well. And we started talking, and she said, it would be really great if we could have our own podcast for Kelly Support Group. And I said, of course you should. Of course you should have your own podcast. And this little idea turned into a few episodes that I then reserved for Kelly Support Group on #Impact on season 4, where they got to, I guess, experiment a little bit as a host. So I just gave them the airtime and they did their recordings. And then you actually took the step to launch your own show. Again, it was during that time when the pandemic didn't allow you to meet all the young people that you were supporting in person anymore. And that made me just so proud. I'm just so happy that you went through with it. And what I also love about that podcast, This Hong Kong Life, is that Sky started out as the host, interviewing young people like you, Juhi. You were a guest on the show. But then Sky actually stepped away from the mic and said, we're going to give the mic to our young people, and they're going to run the show. And that's where you came in as the host of the show. And you talk about topics that are close to your heart, that are close to the young people's heart, like mental health, topics that are oftentimes not easy to address. So, Juhi, how do you go about creating that space for the young people to talk about these issues that are sensitive, hard to talk about, go on air about a topic that, you know, they will know their teachers will hear that, maybe their parents, their siblings, their friends. How do you do that as a host to create that space for them?
I feel like for youth especially, when I was interviewing a lot of Asian youth, there's a lot of stigma around mental health, and they want to, initially when we would first start talking, I would turn off the mic, just have a normal conversation, and they would just say, oh, like, am I allowed to say this? Like, can I talk about this illness? Like, would I get in trouble? Like, hearing those, like, questions just, it broke my heart that they weren't able to talk about these things. And initially, the podcast started out as kind of replacing in-person workshops, and workshops were great. You know, they gave everybody the opportunity to sit down, have real, open, honest conversations. And with podcasts, I feel like it makes it a bit more easier to, I guess, be an interviewer, be an interviewee, and also just be a listener, you know? In a way, we're kind of just creating this space of vulnerability for, even if you're just a listener, you know? You're being able to hear about certain topics, and for them, they just started talking, you know, about their lives, just very introduction stuff. And when it came time to, you know, ask questions about mental health and our society, this is where they started feeling a bit more comfortable, because they were like, other kids out there are listening. And if I get to talk about it, if I get this platform, I'm going to use it well. And a lot of them would say that to me both before and after. So I think for them, it was, they wanted to focus on it being more youth-centric, you know, not being worried about what adults would say or what the stigma was. So it was important to have pre-conversations, I guess, before every episode, but they took with it, they ran with it, and, you know, I was an interviewee at one point, and I felt like I was just able to sit there and say, okay, yeah, this is like my space. Like, I can say what I want, and I can tell other people that it's okay to feel like this. And just allowing it to be really youth-centric and youth-focused was just the greatest. I feel like it provided a lot of peer support, which is one of Kelly's really important mission statements. So it's just an awesome opportunity. I got to be an interviewee, and now I'm an interviewer. So,
and a fantastic interview that is. Yeah, love listening to it. Yeah, so this space, podcasting, it really is. I think that's, as a podcaster, and I'm speaking from my experience, when you're starting out, you think you're starting a podcast, and it's about learning how to edit an audio file, and, oh, that's difficult, right? How am I going to do that? And what you don't realize is that there is this label of this is a podcast, but it is actually so much more than that. And I think the moment I realized that, oh my God, I'm getting goosebumps just being moved by my own story here now. But the moment that it hit me was actually when the first stranger reached out, because when we're starting a podcast, you know, grandma is listening, ma is listening, my husband always listening. Yeah. So the first stranger that reaches out and says, I'm listening to your show and it had an impact on me, is like, wow, this is amazing. And I remember you sharing this in one of our masterminds, actually, Cissy. So I put it down here because I want to relive that moment, you know. There is this special quality of audio podcasting that it creates this intimacy, this connection you as the interviewer have with your guest. But then there is this person in the room that is listening later on for many years even, and then coming back to you saying, I listened to this and it helped me. So how was that moment? Where is that person?
I know, she's in England somewhere. I don't know. It was crazy. Because I've had a few like loose connections from Hong Kong say, oh, you have the podcast, don't you? And that was really special. But I sort of knew of them, or I was one person away from them. But then one day I got this message from this girl called Steph in England. And she just said, I want to thank you for keeping me company on my dog walks through lockdown, because your podcast has been my company. And she said, I put in my WhatsApp group. So she works in football in England, and she'd put in a WhatsApp group that she was looking for podcasts. And then my other friend, Sarah, had said, check this one out. And so she was listening, and then Steph messaged me, and now we're friends. It's crazy. But yeah, I mean, it feels quite surreal, I suppose, and feels a little bit strange, but obviously lovely as well. And it's great.
Yeah, and then you check those download numbers.
I know, I'm like, where?
And that's also the thing that I think I misunderstood about podcasting at first, especially because there's a lot of talk in general in our society about making it to top and getting like the top downloaded and that, and you reach that goal. Hashtag Impact is still a very niche podcast. Yeah, top 5%, but we don't have thousands of downloads for each episode. We don't. We're like a small podcasting community, and the listeners that listen to our shows, they really care about what we have to share. So that, I think, is the super powerful thing about it. And then there's also the impact that actually our podcast has on ourselves, like in the way we grow, in the way we become better communicators. I think I couldn't have moderated that panel in that way like 4 years ago, right? Emery, you shared something with all of us beforehand where you said, since I started the podcast, I feel a bit more in control of my life. In what way?
Yeah, in a lot of ways. I think we shared before that. I think for podcasts, I think is the first time ever when I started a podcast is that I felt I was fully in control in one thing in my life. And that makes sense. So, like, normally, let's say, for example, if you go to school, there's external factors, right? Or if you go to work or whatever. But with podcasts, you design what you want to talk about. You design what guests you want to have on, who you don't want to have on. You can design how the length it is, all that kind of stuff. And that's really, I guess, given me the power as well in other aspects of life. So actually, I can actually do this my way. I don't really have to follow what the norm is or what the standard is. And for myself, I kind of went through a bit of personal journey as well. So I transitioning into male medically, and if you listen back to my first couple of episodes on my podcast, my voice is much more higher than before. And obviously, I always wanted to start a podcast, but I never started it because I knew my voice hasn't changed couple of years back, right, before I started hormones. So as soon as I had my hormones and all that kind of stuff, I started recording podcasts. And then since then, it's taking me to meet a lot more people. It's really broadened my horizons, listen to more stories, and I made friends with some of my guests as well. So it's been a really, really cool journey.
You can reach out to the most amazing people, and they're going to hang out with you, right? You can have like coffee with them, and they actually tell you your story. And what I noticed is that special relationship. And we have another former guest in the audience, Juhi, is a podcast guest on Hashtag Impact, is that you are there with them. And I think, don't we all want someone just to turn all notifications off and just listen, like just pay attention and care for what we have to share? I guess that's what I feel is that special magic about podcasting when you're doing like interview style formats. But I'm sure you have maybe some other hidden rewards that you experienced when you got into podcasting. What is something that surprised you, Juhi, what you maybe didn't anticipate about what the podcasting journey would bring you? What you would say now is like a reward for you?
I think like touching on what Emery said, just having some sort of control over what I have to say, like being able to have that, like it made me feel so validated. Like I was in control of what I could say. And that was as an interviewee, but as an interviewer, hearing other kids' stories, hearing their resilience, like I was validated. Like going back to my own life, thinking about the things that I've gone through, like trauma, mental health issues, like hearing all their stories and how they were going through it, like it was so validating. And I wasn't expecting that. I thought, I'm just going to ask them a few questions. I don't want to make them so stressed. Like, let's just see how it goes. And at the end of it, I was kind of in tears sometimes. And you're sitting there and you're listening to other kids and you're like, wow, maybe they have a better handle on their life than I do, but they're getting through it. And it's helping me in my own life to look back at things that I'm doing. And I never expected that. Like, just being able to look back at my own life and know how I can start taking control on that, like, it's the best feeling, honestly.
Yeah, and we're all nodding here. Yeah, for our listeners that are listening to the recording. Yeah. Nod. Let's hope the audio recording is it still working there? Yeah. Yeah, this I can so relate. Yeah, there's something so validating about you hear someone else's story and you find yourself in it, even though you don't share the exact same experience. But there's something, I think there's not a single, I can honestly say there's not because I'm a very heavy podcast listener as well. I think a lot of podcasters, they get into it like that. They first listen to a lot of podcasts and then they feel, oh, it would be nice if I could do that too, right? So there's not a single episode that I listen to where I don't feel I got something out of it. Yeah. And that sense of belonging, I want to bring up that word, like that you can connect with someone even if it's a total stranger, is very magical. Have you felt that as well with your podcast when it comes to community building and belonging? Because you are so active in the sports space here in Hong Kong as well. Let's bring that up. You have your big bag. You're going to a match, football. The football bag is packed. How has the podcast contributed to what you maybe do with women in sports? With WISE, Women in Sports Empowered, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things I've learned, I think, is that the women's sports community in Hong Kong is a very strong community, and it's quite close-knit, and that's really worked in my favor doing this podcast, because once I interviewed one person, suddenly I had 4 other people to interview, and it was just door after door after door opening. So I've been very lucky. But I suppose it's taught me, I think when I started, I thought women's sports community, it was all just these women that play sports, but as I say, the podcast has evolved, and so has my topic, and so I've moved into just, I suppose, issues and themes and conversation topics that are broader. So certainly this last season, it's not just been women in sport. It's been, let's talk about menstruation in sport. Let's talk about having a baby, then sport. Let's talk about gender identity in sport. Let's talk about sexism in sport. So I think it's expanded my knowledge of what the women's sports community is, because it's a lot more than just women playing sport, because really, I think sport is just a microcosm for how women operate in the world. So there's a lot of sexism and misogyny in sport because there's a lot of sexism and misogyny in the world. And I suppose unpicking those topics has brought me closer to the community because I've been able to get a bit deeper into it, I think. Did that make any sense?
Absolutely. How was your experience with this, Emery?
It's definitely given me a reason to tap at people who I've always followed on Instagram. Have a reason to talk to them, had a reason to ask them questions about how they got to where they are. So it's you learn so much each episode. I think you guys probably find the same as well. You just learn little things as well from your guest, from speaking to them, listening to their stories. You pick up little tips as well. So for my podcast, I interview a lot of people, especially who has pivoted in their career. Typically, I like to kind of interview people who's done the kind of typical corporate job and pivot into like a creative or a bit of a modern career. And you learn how they kind of, a lot of it is actually kind of similar to what you said earlier with sports, kind of a reflection into the real world. I think work as well reflects a lot of what happens in the real world, in a sense where before you find a good job, you really have to understand what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, what you like, what you don't like, before you land your perfect job. And I think a lot of people don't realize, what they do genuinely enjoy doing. So then you kind of listen to stories where people kind of realize, through this period, when they were kind of, I guess, in a sense, soul searching, seeing what fits them. And you hear so many inspiring stories, and you hear, the hardship they've gone through is what to get to where they are. I think there's also a lot of focus in the world at the moment where, you only hear the end result, the success stories. The podcast really talks about how they get to there rather than kind of what they're doing now. So I think also podcasting is such a interesting medium where, you don't really see what they look like. You don't really know how it's being done and recorded, but you have this sense where you were in the room with them as well, listening to the story, and it gives you that intimacy. And guests, surprisingly as well for me, they really open up. They really open up what they really think about. And yeah, I think it's a really powerful medium.
Yeah, so listeners, if you're not here with us in this room right now, we are in this beautiful, gorgeous setting here, in this gorgeous hall with these red, cushy seats. They look so comfy. Are you comfy, guys? Yeah? Let them hear you. Otherwise, the listeners later, they will think we're just, you're not here, right? There is a magic about that when you take the people with you, right? But then there's also what I think I've come to realize, also working with a lot of like new and aspiring podcasters, and I get, it's like a mirror looking myself in the mirror, like me 5 years ago when I first started, is there is this, it is so powerful, it is so intimate, you really get so close to people just with their voice, hearing their voice, and that's freaking scary as well, to put yourself out there like that. How was that for you when you went on your first recording, Juhi, or when you see people that are, I think what we have to do a lot, we are used to it now. Like we are now the hosts. It's kind of nice to be the host, right? You are in charge. But oftentimes our guests are very nervous to even go on a podcast. How has that been? Do you remember that first time?
I remember it so clearly because I was so nervous. Like, I was waiting outside the door. She was like, just wait 5 minutes and then we'll start. And I was like, okay. And I was like, what do I say? Like, should I write this down? Like, should I, like, not talk about this? And she's like, first of all, talk about anything you want. Like, obviously keep it, youth focused and around mental health, but talk about the issues that you feel passionate about. And at that time, my episode was about body image and, trying to recover from an incident that, really impacted my health, and talking about how growing up, people were constantly just saying things about everyone's bodies. Like, that's just how we defined our worth, and the kind of anxieties and depressions that come from it. Like, it was shocking to be able to say that all out loud because I had never said that to anyone. And after she hit the recording button, like, to end it, I was like, oh, so I just said all that and, like, that's okay? Like, she's like, yeah, absolutely. Like, thank you for sharing your story. And I was like, so, like, these are all things that we can say, right? Like, you're not going to bleep anything out. She's like, no, this is an honest podcast. And I think that's something that we can all relate to. We're here not to make everything about structure. We're not here to censor. We're here to make it an honest, open space and just let everybody know that there's someone out there, whether they're listening at home or, they're listening with a bunch of other people. It's good to know that you have that support system.
And take them on a journey with us.
Exactly, yeah.
We did a little podcasting brainstorming, actually, in our prep talk. And, I mean, what is podcasting to you? I wanna share that, throw that in the audience. When you hear podcasting, what comes to mind? Anyone? You have to say it loud so we hear you. Anything that comes to mind. Podcasting is intimate. Ferry commute. Podcasting is your ferry commute. Ah, that's lovely. Where are you listening to podcasts? Where are you taking us? I often listen to podcasts on my commute as well. Yeah, definitely. I think podcasting has kept me sane not just during the pandemic, even before. As a new mom, I think podcasts saved my life when I could just listen in the middle of the night to podcasts. I didn't want to wake anyone up. But what we shared, I want to give you some of these words that we had in mind, what we feel podcasting is today to us. We said podcasting is conversation, unfiltered, empowering, inclusive, healing, non-judgmental. But then I turned it around and I said, what was podcasting to us when we just started out? You want to repeat what you said? You remember what you said?
Scary.
Yeah, I think I said scary.
Intimidating.
Totally intimidating.
Hard, technical.
Terrifying, you said. Difficult. Filled with a lot of expectations.
Oh yeah, I think that's really cool.
What's the expectation you had, Cissy, that maybe busted, or the thing that you didn't even see coming?
What was my expectation on myself when I started?
Yeah.
Oh, just anything other than perfect is a failure, I think. And I think over time I've just, you have to just disassociate yourself from the numbers and, of downloads and stuff, and just remember what we've just said, the words that it is now, and remember your why. And you know what? Who cares if it's a little bit noisy in one of them in the background, or like, who cares if 2 people have liked your Instagram post about that one? Like, I think just my expectations on myself were so high. I think that's a person thing. We've probably all done it, but that's something I think I do a lot anyway. My expectations of myself are obscene, and it certainly was when I started this podcast. Now they're a little less obscene. Just a little.
What was the hardest recording you had to do? What you had to manage, Emery? What tech failure did you have to cope with?
I had an episode that was a really great episode. I thought when I was recording, I was like, yes, this is exactly what I wanted. Like, this person's sharing so much. And that episode was recorded outside, just in a random coffee shop in a cafe. I actually chose somewhere I knew it was going to be very, very quiet. But it turns out, typical Hong Kong, there was just a lot of construction going on in the background as we just hit record. So throughout, the construction started halfway through. So I was thinking, this is perfect, this is great. And then halfway through, all I can think about is, oh my God, what am I going to do now? Like, half of the recording is ruined. And that really upset for so long. And then I just found, there's so many great people in the world as well. What I found since doing podcasting is that I just joined some Facebook group, and I said what the problem was, and then there was just bunch of people asking me, oh, have you tried this software? Have you tried this? Have you tried that? And then I sent it to some guy, and then he cleaned out the voice, the background noise for me. So then you kind of learn as well, like, even if you had some kind of failure in recording or some kind of technical issues, there's always going to be some way or one way or another, someone that will be out there to help you. And that's one thing that I didn't think about before I started podcasting. I just thought, if it's awful, I'm not going to release it, right? But then now I kind of know that there are resources out there, and like you said earlier, like, you kind of have this community as well. People understand what it's all about, and people there's always going to be someone out there willing to help as well.
And that is the special magic, I think, about podcasting and audio as well. Yeah, you can clean it up and have someone help you with that. Or you just make it part of the story as well. Maybe a construction noise throughout the whole recording is tricky. But I was recording in this co-working space, and it was actually not the one that's released recently. Yeah, that was also in a co-working space where we had some background noise. But it was one where we were sitting really right next to they had like this great barista bar there. And he was just making one coffee after the other. It was, that I cannot make the sound. You know the sound, right? They're grinding the beans, like these fresh beans, amazing. Like, oh my God, it's really like, and this was my early days. This was 2016, because I started recording in 2016 before I launched then in 2017. And I was so desperate. Like, what am I going to do? Because I didn't know any tech person who could help me fix that. So I then started talking about the coffee maker guy, because I thought, okay, I'm just going to include him in the story now so that this all makes sense. I'm like, yeah, we're in this co-working space. I mean, you guys, you're working hard. You got to, you just ordered like 4 coffees, right? And now I think these guys are ordering some more coffees. And then all of a sudden, it doesn't matter that there is all this coffee maker noise, because they need coffee, right? It's part of the story. Yeah. Any great moments, or maybe funniest recording moment for you, Juhi, where things maybe didn't work out?
I don't know about funniest, but
They're never funny.
Not funny,
They're
but
never funny in a
when I
moment,
had
no.
like the second or third like interviewee come on, she was just asking like, is it okay like if I just take a break, like I pause in between? I was like, sure. And so, I was just asking, briefly introduce yourself, the kind of issues you want to talk about. So I hit record, I introduced myself, I introduced her, and then about like a minute in, she's like, can we do that one more time? And I was like, yeah, sure. That happened like 5 more times. So I was like, okay, we can keep doing this. But I was like, after the 5th time, I was like, okay, we can't do this anymore. But she was like, I'm nervous. And I was just like, you know what? Let's just talk, you and me. And she was like, should we record it? And I was like, sure, we'll record it if you want. And it ended up being like a 15-minute conversation. And then I ended it. And she's like, can we use that? And I was like, absolutely. See, there doesn't need to be a lot of pressure on it. But going into it, you can just get so nervous. You're going to want a structure, list, talking points, everything technical, all perfect, But it's not going to work out that way. And I feel like it just makes it part of the podcasting experience, You can just laugh a little bit about it, but it makes it what it is. And I really appreciate that that's how it turns out.
And it makes the listener relate, right? They don't want
Absolutely.
perfect. Do they want perfect? No, they're actually laughing with us sometimes.
Yeah.
They're like, oh my goodness, that intro was a little bit of a disaster, Regina. That often happens. Yeah, but now I'm wondering how you are all feeling about podcasting. I mean, there must be a reason what brought you here today, right? So I actually would love to hear if you have any burning questions about podcasting that we can help you answer today, because we really want to set you up here for success. If you've been thinking and wondering about starting a podcast, here you have the experts. They're going to tell you all about it.
Experts, quote unquote, experts.
Yeah, we are all experts in this. We're doing it, right? And we're making it up along the way as well. I think it's a work in progress. Our podcasts are, we are, our lives are, of course. So I'm going to hand this to you. Yes, we have Rachel coming with the microphone.
Oh,
yeah,
I
it
don't
works.
have to turn
Amazing.
it on. I'm good. Who is putting up their hand there? I've lost myself.
Hey, thank you. Great stuff, guys. Question. We're here at the Literary Festival. So why do you choose audio as a medium? I mean, how did you end up podcasting? You could have chosen to start writing blogs or articles in the newspaper or, anything else. How did you arrive at podcasting?
Why audio? We have so much to share about this. Who wants to go first? I'm in love with audio, and I'm going to leave it at that, and I'm going to hand over, because when I get started about why I'm podcasting, you're not going to get me off that stage for the next 2 hours. So, Cissy, why is this medium attractive to you?
I think it's probably going to be quite similar, but I've been a big podcast fan for a long, long time, big radio fan for a long time, and really wanted to have conversations about topics about women and sport and hear other people's stories. And I think it's super powerful, right? I actually was telling this story yesterday at a school visit. I had one guest, and until I listened back, I didn't realize that actually her voice cracks quite a lot when she's telling one particular story. And stupid me, didn't even realize at the time, but there's something super raw and emotional about podcasting. I have thought actually about doing video stuff. I don't know if you guys have as well, but I have thought about starting video. But for me, it had to be a sound. The stories had to be a sound for me, just because I love podcasts and I wanted it to be quite authentic in that way.
For me, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and what I found is and I listen to so many different podcasts. I listen to like pop culture sometimes, or sometimes true crime, or sometimes even like a football podcast. And what I've always found is that somehow you just feel this connection with the host. Yeah. And I never met them as well. They're not in Hong Kong and don't know actually their full name. I have no idea who they are. But you just feel this connection with them. And I really like that part. And I honestly thought podcast was one of the easier kind of medium, right? You buy a microphone and then you just talk into it, right? And that's kind of how I started. But I think the more you do it, the more you realize how powerful it gets, because especially now as well, like there's so many distractions in the world. Like we're always watching YouTube. If not, we're watching something on our phone all the time. With podcasts, you actually, you can do it anywhere. You can do it when you're in the gym, when you're doing your dishes, when you're doing laundry, or whatever it may be when you're commuting. And, it kind of takes you to a different kind of space as well. And it's great, like a tool as well. You kind of give your eyes a bit of a rest from all that looking at computer all day. And yeah, you just have that really strong intimacy you build from your guests and even listeners.
I think like for Kelly's support group, it was kind of a point of going from workshops to podcasts, because workshops were the point where all these kids could come together and sit down and have these conversations. And what I thought was interesting that she said is, why not read it? Why not just have somebody write exactly their story in a blog post, make it super short? And I think the reason that podcasts are, maybe I'm biased, but slightly better than that, is because it's like you're kind of having this conversation with someone, whether it's like an inner dialogue. Sometimes you might say something out loud like, oh, I really resonate with that. It takes you to a different place that I feel like allows you to be a bit more vulnerable, both as a listener, and sometimes you can even communicate with an interviewer. You might have questions for them, but I feel like it's the point of allowing someone to have this really important conversation with themselves. And us as interviewers can sometimes prompt these questions to just help them grow, move forward in life. Yeah.
And I think we really, and we're going to take all the questions. I think what makes it so magical for me as well is I notice it as a listener. It's so powerful because I'm actually listening and I'm not distracted by how that person looks, where the person sits. I challenge all of you today in this room. You experience this now like this. Look out for the episode coming out on our podcast when we're airing what we recorded today, and then re-listen to the whole thing. And you're going to hear different things. Yeah.
Thanks very much. So that question clarified something for me, because I have been interviewed once, and it was shown as a video. So you do have a choice. You can use audio or video, and it's up to the host, right? And but my next question is about you as a host. If you're interviewing someone but you can't see them face to face because of COVID or because they're not in Hong Kong, how do you do that, please? What's the platform or software or whatever you use?
I've not done very much of this, but when I have, I've just used Zoom, and Zoom has worked pretty well for me. But I've only done 2 or 3. I think if it was something I was going to do more, I'd probably use something a bit more fancy like Zencaster or something, but just Zoom for me. That's what I used.
Yeah, Zencast for me. Gina introduced me to Zencast and Zoom. Yeah, I think the thing is that we always think most people think that it's very technical and it's special software we've got to use, but a lot of the times what we use in terms of editing and whatever tools that we use for our podcast is usually it's free and it's usually very accessible. So there's just so many resources you can use, and it's not always as hard as we think it is at first.
Yeah, same as Cissy. I also have used Zoom before, but I think the really important thing is just articulate as much as you can, even if it's not super clear. Just try to, as long as the message gets across, I feel like that's the most important part.
And a mistake I made was that when I did record a couple of episodes on Zoom, I wasn't clear about them needing a quiet room, a quiet space, a good internet connection, because I just thought that they would do that. And I had a really horrible situation where I recorded with a woman that I never released, but she was just walking around London on her lunch break. And I was too embarrassed to say, please, can you go and sit somewhere? And it was such a shame because I really wanted to release her episode because what she was saying was so great. But she was just walking around. There was traffic and everything. And we sat there for 45 minutes. I was like, this is awful. I felt so sad at the end. So don't be afraid to say we can absolutely record remotely, but please do make sure you're in a quiet room, quiet space, good internet connection. I think I felt embarrassed to say that or thought they might just do that, but they don't.
Briefing the guest, so important. Brief the guest. Yes.
Hi, I have a question, but I also just wanted to make a really quick comment. Regina, as a host, you are the warmest and you make such a safe environment. And I had that example when I was being interviewed, and I'd got all my stories and all of the facts, everything prepared and rehearsed. And then when Regina opened and said, just tell me about yourself, who are you? And I froze for it felt like 30 minutes. It was such a long time and I couldn't actually say who I was. So it happens, but you made it such a really safe space to share. So I did want to put that out there. Yeah, really
Thank
amazing.
you.
And you can't tell, the editing is so skillful, you can't tell that there was a gap. My question as an aspiring podcaster is, there's a massive amount of investment that goes into each episode. I know there's a lot of, briefing the guests and I know that, you do a lot around your podcast as well, whether it's, bringing the communities together, building communities through other means as well. But how much time would you say you invest in each episode?
Honestly, hours. I suppose from the initial conversation with somebody, then finding a time to sit and record, then going away. My editing times got shorter at the start, so long, because I used to faff around with editing so much. Now I'm a bit less of a faffer. But for me, it's the most time-consuming thing is sort of promoting the episode or trying to get the episode out there. I would say collectively, one episode, 5 hours, 4 or 5 hours, maybe, with everything involved, from initial meet to last Instagram post, maybe 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah, it definitely gets shorter the more you do. At the beginning, I was very conscious of cutting out all the ums or the and, every little filler words. But then now I'm like, oh, well, it is conversation, so it is natural to have those in it. So now I stop get to hang up on those little details. And at first as well, I thought, to have a podcast, you've got to have, it has to be a video form as well. You had to be on YouTube, you had to do it on Instagram, you've got to do all this stuff. So what I've noticed is that you just got to choose the platforms you can do and that you have the time to do it. Because I think the more you add on to yourself to do it, and if you don't actually have that time in your life to do those things, then you end up hating doing it. And then it's just not going to be good quality. So what I've now done is just choose 2 platforms and stick to it until I've mastered it. I'm not going to expand anything else around the podcasting stuff.
I think Cissy was right. It might take around 4 or 5 hours. But for me, how I would kind of do it is I would say, let's have a 10-minute conversation, which would then turn into an hour. And then it'd be 20 minutes of recording. So it would just be a really long process. But I feel like initially when you first talk to someone, you might want to record it depending on how well you know them. But if you don't know them, maybe just take that time in the beginning just to get an understanding of how they talk, what their patterns are, what they feel like sharing, what they don't feel like sharing, any topics or questions that, they might want to be asked themselves. So I feel like it's important before you do any kind of interview with someone just to think about questions for just a pre-conversation, just like how we had, the 4 of us. So, yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for today. This is really fun. So I've been on the other end where I've been a guest and absolutely petrified and froze. But what I wanted to ask was for introverted people who are aspiring to get a voice out there, but, caught up in the kind of, oh my God, I don't want to be the focus and be, have the attention on. And also mildly control freak, like Cissy was saying. How did you overcome that initial kind of inhibition? Because I've had a mic since 2018, but I haven't done anything with it. It's just there.
The mic is there. It's the first step. And can I do something really crazy now? I hope she's not going to hate me for that. But I would actually like to have someone in the audience answer this question because I know she's about to launch her podcast. I'm totally going to do this now, Roseanne. Yes, Roseanne, how does it feel for you? Because you're right in it in this moment, right? Putting your voice out there.
It's definitely scary, but what I always try to tell myself is that the impact I'm trying to make is bigger than me, and that kind of removes me from the spotlight, from the situation, because, you know, we're out here sharing stories. It's not really about us. It's about the other people. It's about the people we're interviewing. It's about the people that it could possibly impact. So that helps me a lot to remove myself out of the equation and kind of think of myself as I'm like the topic chose me. I'm the vessel to bring that topic out there into the world. Yeah.
Get her on the panel. That was
a great question.
brilliant.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
Coming to you at the next literary festival. Yes, definitely. Yeah. Anything to add on to that? It is what it is. I think that's what we have to allow ourselves to sit with that feeling as well, that it's not easy, it's not comfortable, and there's probably going to be a few people in your life that you have, that you share that with, that are there to tell you to press that launch button. I had that person, it was a good friend of mine, Celia, if you're listening, thank you. And I think it's so important that you find that cheerleader for you. You know, they can be a good friend, they can be your husband, your partner, your sister, whoever it is. It can be me, you know.
Should be Regina.
And then you sit with that and you press that button and then you are in for a ride. I promise you.
And just know that no one will ever hate the sound of your voice the way that you hate the sound of your voice. And your voice is your voice. That is what it sounds like. And also your first couple of episodes, you'll look back one day and be like, I can't believe I actually put that out. But it will get so much easier and you'll be a pro before you know it.
I'll just record a few ones. Like, it doesn't mean you have to release it straight away. Like,
Yeah,
just
that's
record a
true.
few ones and see how you feel. And then if you feel it's good enough, then put it out there. But if it's not good enough, then maybe try a few different things and then re-record and then try again.
Yeah, it's scary, it's exciting, it's intimidating, it's fearful, it's all these scary things, but when you get down to it, it's just the most exhilarating feeling. Like when you just like post it and you're like, hey, I did that, you know? Like I recorded that. That's pretty cool. You might not like the sound of your voice, like Cissy said, but it's out there. Whether you like it or not, it's out there, and the fear will gradually subside.
Are we going to subscribe to your podcast soon? We'll get there. We'll get you there.
Hi, just wanted to say thanks so much for talking. I'm a big fan of the Awkward Turtle podcast, so if you haven't heard it, listen to Emery. He's great. I'm just curious. I think actually, Emery, you said this once. You need to get to like 10 episodes before you feel like you've made it or like your podcast is going to get started. But in your early days when you were just starting, maybe your stats weren't that low, maybe you were finding it hard to get guests or the guests you got weren't quite exactly what you wanted. How do you stay motivated to invest all that time, invest money, invest all this energy and everything into a podcast that you're not sure is going to take off, you're not sure anyone's listening? What keeps you going when you feel like you're not making the impact?
Thank you for that. Sophia's been a guest on the show as well, so check out her episode. Thank you for coming today. I think for me, at first, it was when I first started, I batch recorded like 15 episodes or something, and I was really prepared with that. Okay, I'm going to roll this out one by one, and I've got to have 10 more in the locker, kind of just there ready to go, and then. And like I think you guys will relate as well. When you first you have this big dream of once I release it, I'm going to have thousands of downloads and all this stuff, right? And then that rarely happens. So the first couple of episodes really, I guess, gave me a reality check. Like, it's going to take time. It's not going to be overnight kind of thing. It's going to be at least, I think, a year or something before you get like a really strong tractions. And I think what you got to think about is you kind of detach yourself from the actual numbers and stop checking the numbers in the downloads, but rather kind of really think about the feedback you're getting from the listeners that you have on, or even the connections you're making with the guest, because you don't know what they're going to bring to you next. So really kind of not focusing on the external outcome. And I think when you think about it as well is that when we first started doing podcasts, I don't think any of us wanted it to be like a overnight success. But for some reason, once we do it, we expect that. It must be some kind of psychology thing. But just remember, you're not doing it for the numbers. You're not doing it for the likes, for all that kind of stuff. And then slowly and steadily, you kind of realign your focus, and then you think about that less and less, and then that's where the true motivation comes from. And I think when you enjoy it, even when the numbers are not that great, I think that's what you really that's when you find that you do love doing podcasting, and that's why you carry on.
I think it's the conversations, honestly. In the beginning, like, you might get nervous and you might think, like, how much of, like, an emotional investment should I put into this? Should I just have a conversation with this person? And that conversation might end up be, like, life-changing. You know, you never know what can come out of it. And I feel like if you go into every episode with that mindset of, like, okay, maybe it may not necessarily be life-changing, but I might learn something from this and I could use it in my own life. And I feel like if you're able to kind of go in with that mindset, you change your entire approach to podcasting.
And with each episode, I think that is the thing that keeps motivating me, besides the fact of what all of you just said, is that with each episode you become a better listener, and that's for sure the most underrated skill there is in the world right now, because you have this conversation, and Cissy said it before, and you think you're listening, and then you sit down to edit it, and then you actually listen. And that is something that is so eye-opening. You start to create this feeling of where you hear in people's voices instantly how they are actually feeling and doing, because voice becomes your driver in this. And that's so powerful in whatever you do. And also the speaking part, of course. You're going to sit on stages. Who would have thought our podcast would make us sit in the city center of Hong Kong? Can we just say that to all our listeners from outside of Hong Kong right now? We are here in this gorgeous Asia Society venue at the legendary Hong Kong International Literary Festival in front of this wonderful audience because we started a podcast. I'm not sure if my goosebumps is because of all the meaningful things I said, or
air conditioning.
the aircon that has been blowing at us. I think we have to wrap up because we're all shivering. We're gonna get in our jumpers now. But thank you all so much. We would love for you to hang back, meet us. We are hanging back there in the foyer, so that we can connect and get to know all of you. Thank you for today. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for listening and following us to this year's Hong Kong International Literary Festival. What a special day it was. Recording live with these brilliant podcasters. Please do check out their shows and show them some love. You will find the links to In the Changing Room, Awkward Turtle at Work, and This Hong Kong Live in the show notes. Or just Google their shows and you'll find them too. And another thing that I want you to put on your calendar already is the Hong Kong International Literary Festival coming up next year again. They have been doing this for 20 years and we are just amazed by what they put together. This is not just any event. This is inspiration, conversation for 2 weeks. And we've been so in awe for everyone involved, the amazing authors that presented their books. Make sure, if you have missed it in the past, that you don't miss it next year, and follow Hong Kong International Literary Festival on all their socials. I'll put the links in the show notes too. Thanks so much for today. Talk to you soon. Bye.